this evening with the operating budget. So in just a second, Mr. Doxer will make a motion to take Article 12 from the... On a lighter note, Mr. Carnahan has a point of personal privilege. Mr. Carnahan. Well, this time, yeah, but use this one while we get that fixed.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you for letting me borrow your microphone. Joe Carnahan, Precinct 7. I just wanted to take this opportunity to congratulate meeting member Rebecca Bailey of Precinct 1, who is appearing on Jeopardy tonight, right now, as we speak. As with many of you, I'm looking forward to watching the recording of that after we're done with tonight. Thank you.
I've got my DB asset. Okay, Mr. Doxer moves that we take Article 12 from the table. Is there a second? Second? All those in favor, please raise your cards. Those opposed? And the motion carries. Article 12 is taken from the table. Mr. Maltese? Oh, Ms. Angstrom, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everyone. So this slide here is just giving you a brief summary of where in your warrant book you'd find information. An overview of the budget is 37 to 84, shared costs at 85 to 88, town government 89 to 179, and then the school budget would be 180 to 255, and then the enterprise funds 256 to 269, if you want to read along there when those items are being covered. So we'll start with the reserve position of the town. We started fiscal 23 with just over $19.9 million of certified free cash. As you're aware, at November town meeting, we used a fair amount of free cash, just over $2.9 million. Part of that was $2.2 million for the Killam project for the feasibility study. And then Monday, we used another $388,500. We're proposing using $3.28 million to support the fiscal 24 budget. We also have stabilization funds of just over $1.7 million and $200,000 in FinCom reserves, giving us $15.3 million and 13.2% of our net available revenues. As you're aware, that FinCom has a minimum policy that we have to maintain of 7%. This slide shows you over the last 10 years our reserves as compared to that minimum that's required of us, and we've never really gotten close to that 7%, which is fortunate. We have projected out fiscal 23 and 24 and 25 using a regeneration number of $2.5 million, which is pretty conservative. We see historically much higher numbers. And then uses at 3.28 for the next 2 years and 2.58 million for fiscal 25. This slide shows you our free cash used and our regeneration, if you will. Regeneration is basically, we do a balanced budget. So if we collect more revenues than we project, that's an infusion to free cash. If we spend less on expenses than we projected, that's also an infusion to free cash. The total is what we call regeneration. So you can see by looking at the slide, there's only been a couple years where our uses have exceeded regeneration. So we've been very, very fortunate. This slide shows you the fiscal 24 projected revenues as compared to fiscal 23. Overall, they're going up 3.9%. 3.5% in the property tax area. That number is derived by taking our current year levy, increasing it by 2.5%, and then adding in the projection for new growth. Our local revenues are projected up 12.3%. That seems like a large number, but a lot of our local revenues were conservatively projected during the pandemic, and they're starting to return to pre-pandemic levels. Some of the areas would be motor vehicle excise, meals tax, interest earnings, and interest earnings, as one of the FinCom members had mentioned, is well exceeding projections in current year. State aid, we never know state aid when we're building the budget. So we have an agreement with FinCom, we do 2.5%, and then any shortfall to that, we get from free cash in November, and FinCom will support that. Transfers and available funds up 3.1%. Those are like revolving funds, RMLD earnings distributions, and like overlay surplus goes in there. Our use of free cash is going up 1.7% for a grand total of 3.9% for increase in revenue year over year.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good evening, town meeting members. Tonight, we're going to start with reviewing the share cost. I will then go into the town budget by department. I'll hand it off to our superintendent and our director of finance for the schools, and then I will come back to town meeting and present the enterprise funds. As you can see in the FY24 spending scorecard, which is the summary essentially of our budget, we see an increase of 3.4% in share cost, 4.1% in the town budget, and a 4.3% increase in the school budget. This results overall in a 4% increase in the general fund. After taking into account the enterprise funds, which are meant to be self-sustaining, we see an increase of totaling 3.2% in the FY24 budget for all expenses. In share costs, and we'll dive into this in a lot of detail. In your warrant report, share cost begins in page 85 and goes through page 88 if you're interested in following along. As you can see, overall share cost has an increase of 3.4%. Next slide, Jackie. So in the benefits section, we see a total increase of 4.3%. This is primarily because of a 6.1% increase in the retirement assessment. This is in line with our goal to fully fund our pension liabilities by 2031. That is a goal that we have set forth a few years back, and will actually allow us, once the pension liability is fully funded, to then really tackle our OPEB liability, which in this budget continues to be funded at $500,000, $500,000, which is the same level that was funded in FY23, and is the same level that was funded pre-pandemic. We are projecting a 4% increase in health insurance. These costs can vary because they are driven by enrollment. So essentially how many employees are part of our health insurance. I will say that in meeting with our partners at Maya, which is our insurance company, they are seeing an industry increase in the cost of healthcare. And I'm sure you're following the articles on the Globe in terms of just the increased cost to hospitals. Fortunately, this year we are okay, and it is something that we will continue to track. But it is something that is going to push our budget in the future. In the capital budget, we see an increase of 1.8% compared to FY23, and this reflects an additional $700,000 in funding that was provided by FinCom. The main reason for this funding was a really high jump in vehicle purchases in particular. Our Public Works department saw an increase of almost 30% in some vehicles. For example, our debt schedule will see an increase of 1.4%. As you can see, these are debts that have been issued and have been authorized by town meeting in previous town meetings. We continue our target of 5% capital and debt, although in this year, in this budget, FinCom, with the help of FinCom, we have allotted an extra $700,000, which essentially raises that ceiling to 5.5%. Just to give you a sense of what is coming in terms of debt authorization, we're going to have in FY25 a request before town meeting for $2 million to fund a possible phase 2 of Birch Meadow. We're going to have a request of $4 million to fund, which we hope is the local match of a state grant for roadway and sidewalk improvements on Haven Street. And we are continuing to track the upcoming replacement of the bleachers and the floors in the field house, which we are tracking at $1.7 million. Page 286 of your warrant book has the foldouts, which has the capital plan as well as the debt schedule. Sorry, I did want to highlight just two things that have been coming up on a routine basis. You will see in this slide that the excluded debt is going to start falling off in this upcoming budget. So in FY24, we will see the Wood End School and the debt from the high school project that are going to fall off, and is going to create some room in our taxes. And in 2025, we see that the library renovation project is falling off. Obviously, this is important as we continue to talk about the Killam School building project, which is something that we are working with in very tight conjunction with the school department and the school committee. This is a slide that essentially shows just what is in our debt schedule and what has been authorized by town meeting. In terms of vocational school expenses, we are projecting an increase in vocational school expenses of 4%. As I said on Monday, this line in particular is really hard to project because it does vary depending on enrollment, and it's not something that we will know until the fall, until these vocational schools tell us essentially how many students are enrolled. I did want to flag something for town meeting, that it is something that we mentioned to FinCom as well as the select board. We all know that the VOC, the Northeast Metro Tech is in the process of building a new facility. We are projecting an increase essentially in vocational school expenses. We have put it into our projections in FY25. Obviously, that is a moving target, but it is in place in FY25, and we will take that additional expense into account as we build our FY25 budget. Finally, FinCom reserves remains at $200,000. Luckily, I'll knock on wood, we haven't had to use FinCom reserves in this fiscal year, although it might snow in May, I'm not sure. Next slide. So this is an overview of town government. As you can see, we show a 4.1% increase over FY23. On Monday, I mentioned that we had a reorganization in two departments in particular, and it is reflected in the administrative services budget as well as the public services budget. Our new assistant town manager, Matt Cornelis, who is here tonight, is essentially going to consolidate those two departments and will oversee those the operation basically of those two departments. That is why you will see in this presentation a really modest increase in those two particular budgets. As part of that reorganization, what we did is we made technology a standalone department, and in my opinion, it really highlights the importance of IT in our daily operation of the town. One number in particular that really stands out in this chart is our facilities expenses at 9.4% increase over FY23. As I go through the details of the budget, you'll see exactly why that is. But I'll give you a preview that it is majority related to increasing utility expenses, particularly electricity and natural gas, and that is something that we saw a big impact this fiscal year, and unfortunately, it is something that we are continuing to track into FY25. As you can see on page 91 of your warrant report, which shows a full-time equivalent chart, this budget does not present or recommend or request any new positions. The head count is neutral, which we thought was important, particularly because in this budget we are really implementing the final recommendations of the pay and class study. This is something that town meeting funded previously and was really tackled last summer. And the target of the pay and class study was to analyze the wages of our non-union employees. So essentially, employees at town hall, employees at the library, and the administrative and managerial employees in public safety and public works. So in this budget, in the FY24 budget, we are completely implementing all of the recommendations of the pay and class study, which brings us in line with our peer communities. In administrative services, as you can see, is a very modest increase of 1.3%, and in fact, in wages is 0.2%. This as I mentioned, is largely attributed to the reorganization that is in the process with administrative services and public services. As is discussed in the comments, we are asking for an additional $5,000 in select board reserves, as well as $5,000 in the town manager reserve line. In technology, again, this is a department that is it's a function of the reorganization, and will now be a standalone department led by Kevin Farilla, who is here tonight. As you can see, the majority of the expenses and the increases expenses is related to software licensing, specifically as we roll out Office 365 to all town employees. In the public services budget, again, it has this one-time reflection of the reorganization, resulting in a negative 1.5% of the budget. It's essentially a decrease. In the expenses, it does show a high number of increase in expenses. However, as you can see, it's not a large base. So what we are requesting is an additional $40,000 to provide additional programming for elder services in the Pleasant Street Center. This is, as town meeting knows, and we mentioned in November, the select board and the ARPA committee gave $900,000 towards additional programming in the Pleasant Street Center. We are starting the process of building up our operating budget for the time when the ARPA grant runs out, which is going to be in FY26. In finance, we have an increase of 4.6%. It is majority driven with a 5% increase in wages, which again, as I mentioned, is a result of the pay and class study that was funded by town meeting and presented also in November. In public safety, what you'll see is overall an increase of 4.3%, and I'll be reviewing all departments in detail. Beginning with public health. In public health, you'll see a decrease overall of 5.9%. This is related to the wage line. Essentially, when COVID arose, we hired a part-time nurse that was dedicated towards COVID-19 response, particularly doing contact tracing and providing advice to employees and members of the community with regards to isolation. Since the public emergency and the pandemic is winding down, we felt really comfortable to make this recommendation to town meeting. However, as discussed with FinCom and the Select Board, we do have a few ideas should this position need to be established in the future. In fire, what you'll see is a 4.9% increase in the wages. That increase is mostly driven by contract increases or pay and class adjustments. In the expenses, as you'll see, there's a modest reduction of 0.3%. In police, you'll see a 4.4% increase. And this is largely, again, because of the pay and class study or by contract. And as you can see, the bulk of the budget in police is in wages. We are requesting an increase in expenses, but again, that number is high because it's a small base. The majority of the increase is related to additional requests in office supplies, and also because we had a grant for the comfort dogs that were here on Monday. That grant is now running out, and we have to begin covering the expenses with veterinarian, food, and supplies. In the coalition, we see an increase of 5.2%, which again is really driven by the increase in wages, which is driven by the pay and class study. In dispatch, 3.9%, which is driven by contract and bargaining agreement. In public works, we see a 3.3% increase. This is largely driven in expenses. On the wage side, it is mostly due to contracts. In expenses, what we are seeing is a large increase in goods. So whether it's our line painting contract, whether it's vehicle repairs, in the expenses, we're seeing a very big impact in our budget. In snow and ice, we continue to recommend a flat budget, essentially no increase over the FY23 budget. As was mentioned on Monday, this is the one budget in town that we are able to overspend should an emergency arise. However, when towns and cities increase it, they can no longer decrease it. So the practice in most cities and towns is essentially to level fund and come to town meeting in the future should additional expenses be needed. In streetlights, we're seeing a 3.8% increase, and in rubbish, which holds our recycling cost, hauling cost, and disposal cost, we are seeing an increase of 3%. In the library, we have an increase of 4.2%, and this is primarily led by increase in the pay and class study, because the majority of the employees, like actually all of the employees, are non-union employees in the library. In facilities, this was the budget line that I flagged for town meeting earlier, and you can see this in page 177 of your Warren report. And what you'll see essentially is that the majority of the expenses are associated with the increased costs in utilities, particularly related to electricity and gas. Tom and Susan?
Good evening, everyone. I will start with a financial overview of FY24's budget and then turn it over to Dr. Milichewski to speak with you about our strategic objectives. The presentation this evening will review the following. We'll go over a financial summary. We'll refer to some budget development tasks that we went through. We'll define our investment priorities, and we'll look beyond the FY24 budget. I'm sorry that the slide isn't well lined up. The appropriated 23 budget was $51,783,000. There was the FinCom guideline, which allocated 3.75% of an increase to the school department's budget. Since then, there were additional dollars allocated to the school department through accommodated costs and a community priority of $150,000 to help us continue our pathway toward universal full-day K. The total amount of our FY24 budget is $54,006,623, which totals a 4.29% increase. The FY24 recommended budget aligns our investments with our strategic objectives. We identified $1.7 million in strategic objectives funded through the FY24 budget, with an additional $111,000 funded through grants. Our budget meets all contractual obligations and legal mandates. Our personnel costs reflect a zero-based budget based on contractual obligations and totaled about $1.17 million. Our non-personnel costs were projected based on known service contracts, spending trends, and anticipated changes in demand and price. And then lastly, what our FY24 recommended budget does is maximizes sustainable resources and leverages our operating funds, renewable grants, special revenue funds to better support Tier 1 and Tier 2 instruction. And this will allow us to invest to save for the future. And I wanted to give you a couple examples of that related to personnel. The way in which we've been able to leverage and maximize our resources, which are sustainable, is through a 240 special ed grant. This grant, whenever the school department charged licensed teachers and licensed and certified staff to this grant, we were charged a percentage, 11%, by the federal government and state government to pay for additional retirement benefits above and beyond what our staff are already covered. It was essentially an added tax. So by shifting licensed staff out of that grant and replacing with our paraprofessionals who are hourly paid, we were able to save about a little more than $80,000 with no impact whatsoever on any of our staff's retirement pensions. So that simple little shift and change allowed us to leverage an additional $80,000 that we didn't have access to before. Another small example is our food service funds. We have hired lunchtime paraprofessionals to come in and work in our elementary schools 2 hours a day. We're charging those wages now to our special revenue fund, saving the operating budget about $36,000 per year. In addition, we've implemented school choice. We have received a higher grant from the Department of Public Health. And then related to non-personnel resources, our circuit breaker continues to increase. We moved out of a contract with a nearby community to provide services. We've had changes and reductions in student placements. And we were able to shift out of payment of a requirement that demanded that we have employees have physical exams. So, next slide, please. Thank you. Our approach to the budget development process started with our school committee guidance, and I won't read through the items on this list, but these were priorities and guidance that school committee provided to us, which drove our approach and our planning. And just a couple I'll mention. We're going to continue progress toward universal full-day K. We'll consider a plan to incorporate all of our ESSER-funded positions, or most of them, and we'll respond to recommendations by DESE and through the consultants that evaluated our special ed and district programs. Our budget development process also included 4 principles, if you will. One was we consulted with stakeholders and worked with leaders to identify investment priorities that aligned with our district strategic objectives. We use program assessments and student data and our instructional network outside of the school department to make decisions on proven strategies that produce gains in student learning. We calculated baseline costs to comply with contracts and legal mandates, person by person, guided by projected enrollment, class sizes, and student needs, as well as teacher-student ratios. And we maximized our resources, as I explained on a prior slide, by redeploying existing resources and better leveraging our grants and special revenue funds to support our priorities. I will turn over the presentation now to Dr. Milichewski.
Good evening, town meeting members. I'd just like to start by thanking everyone in this room for your continued support of our schools. I think in my 2 years here, I've spoken with many of you and many in our community how this is a town that really invests in schools in so many different ways. So I, on behalf of our schools, just appreciate your continued support, collaboration, partnership, and all that we do. So Susan spoke a little bit about just some of our strategic investments or some of our new investments in our schools at FY24. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to speak to those in broad strokes. You'll see here on the screen the investments that I'm going to speak to are organized by the 3 strategic objectives within our strategic plan. The first of those being supportive and safe learning environments, which essentially is ensuring that all of our students feel valued, safe, seen, affirmed, and connected in our schools. We know one of the greatest predictors of a student's success is feeling how connected they feel when they come to school each day. And I also have spoke with many of you over around the question of has the social and emotional need for our students sort of eased over the past year in a post-pandemic context. And I think we all know, unfortunately not. We've seen that the continued needs of our students continue to increase, particularly social and emotionally. So you'll see in the budget continued investment in not only maintaining, but really bolstering social and emotional supports for our students. Second strategic objective is around coherent instructional systems. We believe our first and foremost, our role as a school district is to ensure top-tier, top-notch academic outcomes for all of our students. So we need to invest in initiatives and strategies that are going to improve the quality of teaching and learning in all of our classrooms. And then last, of course, to be able to execute on strategic objective 1 and 2, we need to be able to have efficient operational systems that allow us to, again, move the district forward instructionally and in support for students. So I'm going to break down some of the major investments that you'll see in each of those. If you are following along within your warrant report, you can see a detailed description of each of these investments. I think it's on page 196 through 202. I'm going to, and I know a lot of you have followed along with this presentation in some form as we've presented to both school committee and FinCom over the past several months. So I am not going to go through each of these line by line. When we get to questions, if you'd like me to speak in more detail on any of these, I'd be happy to. But I wanted to pull out a couple that I think are particularly important for our community. The first one being, the first bullet is the process as beginning to a 2-year process of adopting ESSER funded positions. We know that through the ESSER grant, we have put a lot of positions on the grant and starting to be able to shift some of those positions over to our operating budget. So in the FY24 budget, you will see 2 secondary counselors, a special education teacher, and 2.6 FTE of team chairs that are now absorbed into our operating budget. Those are positions that, since those have sort of taken root, kind of during the pandemic context, we have seen bring major value to all of our students and roles that we feel like we need to continue to invest in. The other one on this slide I want to speak to is around counselors. So we think one of the best strategies to support our students social and emotionally is to provide students with access to strong school counselors. And I think for many of the parents in the room, you can probably speak about some of the counselors in your student experience that are really vital to their day-to-day, again, experience. So going back last year, our largest investment last year in the budget was investing in 5 new counselors at the elementary level. Prior to last year, we did not have any school counselors in our elementary schools. So last year, we put a 1.0 school counselor / METCO coordinator in all of our buildings. This is a dual role. The first part of the role is to be able to provide all of our students with direct counseling support, both Boston and Reading resident students. And the second part is to be a direct liaison to our Boston resident students and families. We've seen that these roles have had a really encouraging impact on our students and families thus far. And therefore, we have expanded in the FY24 budget to add a similar position at the middle school level now, split between Parker and Coolidge. And then the middle school coordinator position is now shifting to the high school. So again, you'll see a continued investment in the school counselors, given just the social and emotional needs that we're seeing for our students. The only other one on that slide I'm going to speak to quickly is the bottom two around, actually we can do next slide for now. I'll answer a question on that. Second strategic objective is around coherent instructional systems. So a couple of on here that I wanted to point out and speak to. The first around elementary assistant principals. So if you may know, currently in our elementary schools, they have a considered like a stipend position assistant principal role, which is in most cases a teacher who is able to sort of fulfill some of the assistant principal responsibilities after school. We know that there's been an ask over the past several years around full-time assistant principals at the elementary school, and I want to provide a little bit of context on the rationale for that ask. We feel that the role of the principal has never been more complex, and we also know that the research shows that the best strategy for improving academic outcomes is to invest in the instructional leadership of principals. So we feel that by adding an assistant principal at all of our elementary schools, this will enable our leadership teams to better coach and support our teachers, provide high-quality evaluation, meet the day-to-day behavioral, social, and emotional needs of our students, act as liaison with our families, things that our principals, I think, right now do well, but just can't do sort of in the way that we need them to or they want to with only sort of one person in that role. So we feel that this is going to be a huge lift for our schools and have a major impact on the day-to-day experience of both of our students and our staff. I'd also like to share, too, that the secondary sort of strategy behind this is to give us a bench of talent in the event of any principal transition. We know that we've had some elementary principal transition over the past several years, and all of those searches we've had to look externally for candidates, and we haven't had a pipeline of talent within. So in a time when there is more turnover in leadership positions just in the sector, we think it's important that we have a strategy to be able to have people be able to fill those roles from within. We know there's a huge impact if the one leader of a building steps aside, that has again made a major impact on our students. So this primarily is a way for us to improve academic outcomes and supports for our students, but also acts as a way for us to build a pipeline of talent for in our schools. The other one I'll share on here, at the bottom two bullets, you see the board certified behavior analyst and the secondary transition specialist. These stem directly from our special education program reviews. So this past year, we had outside consultants come in and review many of our substantially separate special education programs to give us guidance and advice and recommendations on how we can better support and better build in-district programs. Two of the top recommendations from the consultants were hire a board-certified BCBA and a secondary transition specialist. So we feel that it is important for us to align our sort of investments with what the program recommendations put forth, and we feel again that these two roles will help us to build better in-district programs for our students and support the students that we have. The last one on this slide I want to speak to quickly is around the invest. You go back one, Jackie, around the 1.5 FTE increase in multilingual learner teacher. I think this is just interesting for the community to know. So starting last year in FY23, we had about 39 multilingual learners across our school. Fast forward now, today we had our 69th multilingual learner join our school. So a pretty significant increase in 1 year. What's even more interesting in there is that last year we had only 19 of those students were level 1 or level 2 multilingual learners, which means they're newcomers, right, with very limited English proficiency. That number's jumped from 19 to 39 in just 1 year. And then what is the impact of that? Students who are newcomers require twice the amount of instructional time and direct instruction from our MLL teachers, so we have to shift our staffing to make sure that we can support our students who are coming in, again, with limited English proficiency. But I thought that would be interesting to know for the community, just as we have our seeing a shifting demographics in our multilingual learner population. And then our last strategic objective is around school operations. The only one I'm going to speak to here quickly is around our annual community report. So you all should have received back in the fall our first annual community report. If you didn't get that, certainly let us know, but that should have gone out to all Reading residents and also all staff who live outside Reading. We think that this was a way for us to be able to connect with many members of our community who aren't necessarily always engaged in our schools, to give you updates around what's happening in our schools, to give you an idea of what do the actual dollar investments look like on the day-to-day for our students. If you have any feedback on what worked, what we can do better, what you would like to see in the next annual community report, please let us know, but that is something that we continue to plan to continue moving forward. So I gave a little bit of a high level of just some of the strategic investments and the rationale behind them. I'm going to turn it back over to Susan, who's going to speak about some of the dollars behind those and break it down by cost center.
Vaughn.
So on the slide behind me, you'll see the breakdown of our 5 different cost centers and the percent to total that the budget consists of for the school department. Administration makes up 2.4% of our total budget, regular day 59%, special ed 31%, district-wide services, which include 4 different areas, athletics, extracurricular, technology, and school health services, and then lastly facilities, 3.1%. Very briefly, administration's total annual budget is $1.3 million. We saw less than a 1% increase between FY23 and FY24, and many of the increases had mostly to do with COLA contractual arrangements, and there were a number of decreases through efficiencies and trending the consumption of materials were trending down. Under regular day, our regular day budget is nearly $32 million, and it showed a change of 7.57 over FY23. Most of the changes took place across COLA contractual changes and investment priorities that Dr. Milichewski laid out in his presentation. Special ed services contains, actually totals $16.7 million. The change over FY23 is a decrease of 1%. Although there were increases related to COLA and some investment priorities, the non-personnel budget was reduced in a number of ways by a total of $901,000. That decrease is reflected in a number of different categories. One is the elimination of an out-of-district arrangement with Wakefield Public Schools for post programs, post-school services. There was a reduction of legal services. There was also an increase in circuit breaker reimbursement, which reduced our expenses. And lastly, there were changes in out-of-district placements. Although there were increases in the fees charged for out-of-district placements, because we were able to reduce the number of students seeking services out of district, for 3 different reasons. We were able to see a decrease in this category of nearly $500,000. We had a student who did not need to move out of district. We were able to accommodate and meet that student's needs within our specialized programs. And for those of you who might want to learn more about our in-district programs, we offer 6 of them, and they're described in our budget book, in the school department's budget book. I think it's on page 43. These specialized programs allow us to build capacity and build our expertise in district to care for our students and to educate our students who live right here in Reading, instead of sending students to a different placement out of town. Under district-wide services, I've mentioned that there are 4 categories that make up this cost center. Athletics, we offer 8 sports. We've had nearly 1,200 participants. We have a 4% change increase in athletics, mostly related to stipend adjustments and COLAs. In extracurricular activities, we offer 11 activities, about 255 participants, student participants, and that has increased over the last year. Much of the increase in this category relates to stipends and transportation. Health services, it's nearly a budget of nearly $1 million, and this showed a change of 13, almost 14% over the last year, primarily due to the need for a one-to-one nurse for next year. And then lastly, technology, it's about a $700,000 budget, $668,000, and it saw about a net increase of 1%. And finally, last but not least, our school's facilities budget. The school department has a $1.6 million budget for facilities. The change was an overall increase of about 1.5%, and it focused mostly on COLA and service contract changes for our contracted cleaning services in our schools, and some supply cost changes. And now I'll turn it back to Dr. Milutevsky.
So as we move towards the end of the presentation here, I'm going to speak a little bit just about what's beyond FY24, and then Susan's going to speak about what we think is a really important question: how can we ensure that our budget's sustainable too, especially with some of our new investments? So beyond FY24, there shouldn't be a lot of surprises about what's ahead and what our district's focusing on. Some of the things on here around universal full-day kindergarten, the elementary school building project, continuing to invest in new curriculum around and literacy and math. The conversations that we've had a lot with the community. There is one on here that I think is of interest to the community and that is sort of new for us, and I think will be a focus area for us the next couple of years, and that's around the high school innovation pathway. So I want to take a couple of minutes to speak to that. Recently, DESE approved innovation pathway designation for us in 3 areas: computer science, engineering, and digital media. In short, what that means is that allows students to take a set of courses in one of those areas that's of interest to them, that is in a high-demand area post-graduation, and leave with, and a lot of times, industry-recognized credentials and partnerships with local industry, partners, and also access to new post-secondary opportunities. So for a lot of our students who have wanted more computer science, wanted more engineering, are big into digital media, this is something that is really exciting to them. We think that this is something that just changes what the traditional day-to-day experience looks like for our students. Now, I think what's also exciting about this, there's a lot of conversation about innovation pathways in the ed sector in general. So there's a lot of grant funding out there right now to help support us in these areas. So for example, this past year, we've applied to $693,000 of grants to support us in the area of our innovation pathway rollout. That money would be used to help us pay some of our seniors who are right now out on internships with some industry partners, to help us to be able to get some materials or technology. So for example, in our computer science program, and to make sure we have the most up-to-date technology, and also to make sure that in our engineering pathway, that the technology and the equipment that our students are using aligns with what is actually out there and happening in the field. So we think that we're going to be able to utilize a lot of those funding sources, a lot of those grant opportunities to be able to help us to build those pathways out. Something really exciting for RMHS, and I think that will help RMHS look a little bit different in a couple years. We have plans to continue to build out new pathways. We have students asking us now for pathways in biomed, early childhood, other areas too. So I expect to continue to give town meeting updates on that over the years. The other thing that sort of a subset of that it can be also our work in dual enrollment. So you may have heard over the past couple of years, we started talking about dual enrollment. Our students can now take classes at RMHS where they get credit for RMHS classes and also get college credits. So that is something that we are planning to continue to expand. So that way, when our students leave RMHS, they're already a step ahead in being able to remove some prereq classes at college, be able to shorten for some students college, or to be able to lessen the costs of some of the post-secondary experiences too. So again, I think that most of these things are on here, are things that we've spoken about over the years or communicated, but that's one that I think is especially relevant for us right now and a major area of focus. We know also many of the questions that we've received over the past couple of months going through the budget process is how can you ensure the sustainability of both sort of your what's in your budget now and some of the proposed investments in FY24. So Susan's going to speak a little bit about that.
Yes, so ensuring sustainability is, as you all know, incredibly important. Not using one-time funds to hire staff and develop services that can't continue into the future. So as we created this budget, we ensured that we were projecting our budget, that we'd be able to accommodate over the years these investments. And I wanted to walk through with you a few different ways in which we're ensuring sustainability. We've created strategic multi-year financial plans that continues to leverage operating funds and existing resources with grants and special revenue accounts, and that all align with our district priorities. So we're all working toward the same goal and the same outcome. We're ensuring that the personnel budget, which represents about 85% of our appropriation, is efficiently and effectively allocated. The way we do that is assess and try to optimize student groupings, staff ratios, and teacher schedules, instructional schedules. We're investing deeply in staff development in Tier 1 and Tier 2 instruction that yield the highest outcomes for students over time, which will result in future savings. We're managing risk by continuing to budget for all our known and potential expenses. We're leveraging our prepayment of special education out of district tuitions, and we hope to establish a special revenue fund to help us with any unanticipated budgets that, or any unanticipated expenses that might come our way. We assess and closely monitor our financials all throughout the school year, in part to identify savings early enough so we can redirect savings to help support and infuse what we know works for increasing student outcomes. And then lastly, we evaluate our outcomes and we refine our budget development process every year. Just in this last, second to last slide, we have heard questions about a status report for our full-day kindergarten and the number of FTEs that are funded through the grant. So I want to take a moment to share some information with you about those two topics. Our full-day kindergarten pathway, we've continued to work toward and budget toward getting to free full-day K for all of our Reading residents. The FY24 budget has reduced for the second year in a row our full-day K fee. We have a plan to continue that reduction into next year, and by FY26, we hope that we might be at a point where we can charge zero tuition. We are leveraging our special revenue fund, and through the town's generous investment in full-day K this year as a community priority, we've been able to make more progress. toward offering free full-day K. And then the FY24 funded FTEs through our different grants. In total, it's 36.88 FTEs. Our Title I supports tutors. Our SPED grant supports 25 FTEs of paraprofessionals and BCBAs. Our Special Ed 262 grant, which is an early childhood ed grant, supports preschool para. Our METCO budget and grant supports 6 FTEs, adjustment counselor director and a METCO coordinator. And then lastly, our ESSER fund supports 3.4 FTEs. And this fund ends in September of FY24, so we'll be absorbing additional FTEs into the FY25 budget. And in summary, we just wanted to share with you that we believe that this FY24 recommended budget aligns our investments with our strategic objectives, meets all of our contractual obligations and legal mandates, maximizes sustainable resources and leverages renewable grants and special revenue funds to support these strategic objectives. And then lastly, invests to save. We believe that this budget, by redeploying our funds to Tier 1 and Tier 2 services, will yield savings over time. So, thank you.
Mr. Maltese.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Tom. So I'll close it out with just an overview of the enterprise funds. And again, just as I mentioned in the beginning, each enterprise fund is meant to be self-sustaining. I'll start with the water and sewer enterprise funds. But before I go further, I just wanted to remind town meeting that water and sewer rates are set by the select board. We have had a lot of conversations about them, and we will have a presentation at the next meeting about possible rates, and may have a vote in May or in June. It's up to the incoming chair. As you know, we've had a significant amount of capital, as you've seen in town, quite a bit of construction in water and sewer. And one thing to highlight is that we have $930,000 from ARPA funds that were allocated by the select board and the Reading ARPA committee to offset these ongoing costs of capital expenses. So again, we are in the process still of establishing the water and sewer rates. Overall, the water enterprise fund, we are seeing an increase of 3.5% this fiscal year, and as you can see, that is the breakdown. We are estimating an increase in the assessment from the MWRA of 3%. However, we received a preliminary assessment figure that hopefully is lower than that and will ultimately fall to retained earnings, which is the equivalent of free cash in the enterprise fund. In the sewer enterprise fund, again, we are in conversation with the select board about establishing the water and sewer rates. This fund shows a decrease actually of 1.5% overall, and in a similar way, we received very good news so far that the MWRA assessment that we budgeted might come in lower. In the storm water enterprise fund, this is a fund that is charged at a flat rate, and it's not based on usage. And what it does, it helps supports capital projects that are really specific to stormwater and stormwater maintenance. We are seeing a decrease in this enterprise fund of 27%. And just as a highlight, we are funding a drainage master plan in the FY25 budget that will be funded out of this enterprise fund, as well as an increase of $200,000 to execute the recommendations of that master plan. The PEG enterprise fund essentially is a pass-through. It is the funds that we collect from Comcast and Verizon, and essentially is passed through to RCTV, and that is how they fund their operating budget. This is flat at $623,000. Last April was the first time that we presented the landfill enterprise fund. Essentially is an escrow account from the developer of the Home Depot site. They are required by contract to give us essentially $40,000 a year, and they do testing of soil and water. Once they show us that testing has been done, we then reimburse them for that cost. So far, we haven't had any issues either with the results or with the process. And as I mentioned on Monday, we do have a pollution insurance liability that should anything come up, will protect the town in this process. And that is it for presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. FinCom report, Ms. Downing.
Thank you. After several weeks of meetings of hearing all these presentations in great detail, including directly from the departments, at our March 15th, 2023 meeting, the FinCom voted 8-0 to recommend this article to town meeting.
Thank you. And now the way we will work this is I will call each of the line item sections. And if you want to discuss that, that is the time to do it. Excuse me. That's also true of any amendments you may want to propose. So we will begin now with the first section, line item B99, benefits. Is there any discussion? None appearing? We will move on to the next section. C99, which is the capital. None appearing. Next is D99, debt. Okay. Next up is E99, vocational education. Okay, next is F99, FinCom Reserve Fund. Next is G91, Administration Services Wages. All right, next is G91A, Technology Wages. Next is H91, Public Service Wages. Next is I91, Finance Wages. Okay. Next is J91, Public Safety Wages. K91, Public Works Wages. There is somebody, oh, in the back, yes.
Shirley Jia, Precinct 6. I actually have no question about that, but I do have question about public health wages, but which is not listed here.
Do we not have a second? Oh, okay, that J91, that's, where are we here? Oh, we just passed it. You just passed that. Did you have a question on that? Did I miss you?
I'm sorry, I didn't see the line. Which line it is?
It's J91. We just went by it now, but if that's
Oh,
what
sorry.
you have a question.
Yes, I do have
Okay,
a
go ahead.
question. On page 139, I noticed the health director's actual age in 21 was 57K and 22 over 102, and on this budget over 121. I wonder if we hire multiple people or that person just got more than double.
Mr. Maltese?
Thank you very much. So in the FY21 budget, it was actually a part-time person, and that person actually worked remote. This town meeting actually funded in the FY22 budget a full-time position, and it was funded at that number, $102,000. However, it took some time to fill the position. So the actual salary that our current health director was hired at, it was higher than what was budgeted. So it was essentially a restructuring of the health department.
So that person has increased responsibility?
So in the FY21 budget, it was a part-time person that worked remote. It was not a full-time health director.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on J91?
Sorry, I do have a question, page 147. I'm not sure which line it's under. This is for the clinician and outreach. I think this is also public health related, and this person got like almost triple the salary than 21.
Mr. Maltese?
Thank you. Very similar, actually. So the clinician and outreach is not one person; it is multiple people, but it's just bundled into one line, and essentially this town meeting actually I want to say the FY22 budget created a new position called the mental health clinician, and that person now reports under the coalition. Her name is Tanya, and she is doing an amazing job, fantastic job for the town.
Thank you. So there's more than one person.
There is more than one person in this line.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion on J91? All right, we'll move to K91, Public Works wages. None appearing. We'll move on to K93, Public Works snow and ice expenses. None appearing. We'll move on to L91, library wages. Discussion? None appearing. We'll move on to M91, core facilities. Not appearing. M92, town buildings. Nope. Okay. Where are we here? U99, the school department. Right, Mr. Arena first, and I think there was one right behind you.
Good evening, John Arena, Precinct 1. I was wondering, I didn't hear in the prepared remarks any comment about just the general trajectory of headcount at the school or the general trajectory, and I know these are trends, not anything to be forecast, but I'm just curious about the general direction we're going in terms of headcount in the school, the student body, as well as the direction that special ed is going, just from a trend point of view. Are there any remarks that could be provided on either of those points?
Ms. Button?
Yes, in terms of student enrollment, was that your question related to student
Yes,
enrollment?
normally it's expressed as a chart showing years and head count and so
Yes.
forth. Is something like that available?
Yes, there is. There's a demographic and enrollment forecast study posted on our website. In addition to that, that study prepared by McKibben and Associates shows that with the exception of a small dip in FY25, enrollment will fairly level out at about 0.5 to 1%. So we're projected to have a steady state, essentially, of enrollment.
That 0.5 or 1%, does that represent growth, or is that just the variation year to year?
Within the demographic study, you'll see that Dr. McKibben
Okay, we'll
laid
take-
out the turnover of homes.
We'll take a look.
Makes-
The same comment on special ed as a percentage of the total budget. Any comments in terms of that trend and what we're likely to see in the out years?
Well, we have seen the number of students in district and out of district decrease. We continue, the more we invest in our in-district programs, the more students will be able to serve in district. The more we invest in Tier 1 and Tier 2 instruction, the less we'll see in terms of the growth of special ed. But we have seen decreases over the last year in special ed population.
I understand the qualitative comments. I was hoping to meet something more quantitative, maybe on a going forward basis. That'd be useful.
Sure.
Because it harkens back to past years and maybe has some visibility into the future. But thank you for your comments.
If you'd like, I can direct you to our budget book where I provide an enrollment chart for in-district and out-of-district special ed classes, special ed enrollment. It's on pages 62 through 68
Thank you.
of the school committee budget.
Okay, I saw further here. Okay. Ms. Downing?
I don't know if this is for Ms. Patan or the superintendent. Can you explain why that motion says 54,006,623, but the budget book and the slide said 53,725,343, like a difference of 281.280?
Ms. Bud?
Yes, the the FinCom's guidelines in October allocated a 3.75% increase. Between the time of the FinCom guidelines being voted and the time our budget was presented, we received an additional allocation through accommodated cost savings and to support, through a community priority, $150,000 of full-day K. Those additional line items totaled $54,006,623.
I just have two more quick questions.
Sure. And if I can, before I turn over, on the second, again, it's unfortunate that it wasn't lined up correctly, but on the second page of the slide presentation, it shows the additional costs that were added to the appropriation. Yeah.
Ms. Downing?
Yeah, so just two more quick questions, and maybe you can't answer one of these because it would reveal information. The added budget for the one-to-one nurse, is that expected to be something that's going to be ongoing in every budget in subsequent years or something?
Dr. Maliszewski?
So the one-to-one nurse position in the budget is due to a student medical need. At this point, we don't know if that will continue. I would say there's a possibility that in the middle of this year that may not be needed, but it is impossible to sort of predict whether or not, sort of on a go-forward basis, that will continue, given sort of the student's medical need. So apologize that we don't have more clarity on that, but I think we understand why.
Ms. Downing?
So the last question is on the increase in multilingual learners. Do you find that they're all, if it's multilingual, but is it really mostly the same language that the big concentration is in, so at least we can leverage not needing as many different translation services? You know what I mean? Is it like what I've heard, maybe lots of Portuguese from Brazil? Is that what mostly it is? Yes? Thank you. That's all my question.
Oh, okay. Dr. Maliszewski?
I don't have in front of me the specifics of the sort of the primary languages a lot of the 69 multilingual learners, but I can share that out of the majority of students that we have received this year, multilingual learners, over 75% of them have speak Portuguese as the primary language. Also, we're trying to be mindful as we continue to provide supports for our multilingual learners. We also recognize that some of our students who may not be coded as multilingual learners, a lot of the families do require translation support as well. So it's a little bit more layered as we think about how to support our families as well.
I'll come back to you. There was one on the edge here first. Yes. Oh, well, Ms. O'Neill, I'm sorry.
Mary Ellen O'Neill, Precinct 6. I just wanted to say I'm really pleased to hear that you're going to invest more, not more, but keep investing in social and emotional learning and the counselors at the elementary school and whatever. I'm really happy to hear that. The only other thing I want to say, it's difficult for someone who's not in the system any longer to hear what I call jargon or acronyms like Tier 1 and Tier 2, DESE, BCBAs. I have no idea what they are, so it really takes away from understanding the report when you don't understand what you're talking about. Thank you.
Ms. Snowdoxer?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Linda Snowdoxer, Precinct 1. First of all, thank you so much for the thorough report. And a little bit of an apology. I have not combed the school committee budget the way I used to do. And I think that the question, my answers, I probably anticipate what they are, but I have a couple of questions. One is, it was mentioned that a grant was changed. It was going to pay for teachers, and because of the COLA, it got switched to paraeducators. And I just wanted to make sure that the qualifications were considered as well. I didn't hear that, and students first before the money and the savings. So I'm assuming the answer is yes, but I don't want to assume anything. So I don't want to save money off of the quality of education. That's my first question. The second one is, I know that it was in the document that we saved 16% on the school choice, and I'm wondering what the impact of the programs needed by students coming in was financially, whether 16%, we got the grant for the people coming in, but what about the programs and the staff time that's expended, and was that calculated into the numbers? And then my third question, and that had to do also with the multilingual programs needed, like are those related, or are those all Reading people that needed the extra services? And I'm thrilled that we are addressing those needs. That's not a criticism, just wondering how the numbers come out. And then with the SPED revolving fund, I just was wondering how that works with the accommodated cost. I know that the town has been very generous addressing needs that we couldn't anticipate, financial expenses that we couldn't anticipate in the past by doing it through accommodated costs. But now we have the SPED revolving account that's being approved. And so are those working in tangent, or are we losing the ability to also apply for the accommodated costs when we have the additional SPED, unexpected SPED costs? Thank you.
Ms. Barton?
I'm going to get started to try to answer your questions, and if I've missed anything, then please let me know. Regarding the 240 grant and the $80,000 savings, this is a grant that we receive every year. It grows each year. It's a federal grant for about $1.2 million. That grant can be used on a number of different qualifying services, teachers, paraprofessionals, supplies, materials, et cetera. We were charging teachers to this grant just by shifting the funding so that paraprofessionals were charged to this grant and the operating fund paid for the teachers. We saved $80,000. It had nothing to do with, the the serving of the students. It's simply an accounting shift. Regarding school choice, I think that was your second part of your question. We enrolled 9 students this year through school choice, 1 kindergartner and 8 students, elementary through high school. This program allows us to receive a $5,000 reimbursement from the state. The seats that were identified for school choice were empty seats. They were in a classroom that was not yet at threshold. There was an opportunity to have additional funds come in to essentially support an empty seat. Any student that comes into our community through school choice, and if they receive special ed services, those special ed services are also reimbursed by the state. Could I mention something?
Go ahead, yeah.
No, go ahead. All right. Lastly, I know that you asked a question about the Special Ed Reserve Fund, and I'll be able to explain more about that this evening. But very briefly, this is a reserve fund that's established through the town where funds can sit and remain earning interest for when and if there are any unanticipated costs related to special ed. And in the presentation this evening, I'll share with you how we'll fund that special revenue fund and how it works, how we'll be able to access those dollars. But essentially, they're a reserve fund waiting if and when we need them.
I'm just going to add one small piece, and I know Tom Wise is going to speak as well, as the around the question around school choice and MLL combination too. So there was no school choice students who are also MLLs. So I just wanted to clarify that piece as well. Also, all of the students who have come in from school choice, none of them have required us to go back to the sending district and receive additional funds outside of the $5,000.
Ms. Snowdoxer?
Oops, sorry. Linda Snowdoxer, Precinct 1 again. My question, I understand how the reserve fund works. My question was whether that was going to impact the accommodated costs that the town has done in the past, but I will wait for that presentation. So I just wanted to, I understood the reserve fund. That's their connection is what my question was.
Mr. Wise?
And Ms. Baton can certainly clarify here, but the short answer to your question, Linda, is that it's not going to adjust necessarily how we do accommodated costs at all. What it will mean is that what's happened over the last few years is we've over-accommodated accommodated costs. And so we've locked up money that could have been used for strategic purposes, like the assistant principals and other things like that we're trying to do this year. So what the Special Education Reserve Fund is going to do is say we don't have to lock up as much money in this. We're still going to do the special education stuff in the accommodated cost, but instead of say $5 million, it might be $4.5 million, something along those lines. So we'll have less reserved for this, which means on a go-forward basis, we can have just this reserve fund set aside, that if it's an emergency break glass situation, we can break the glass to use that reserve fund. So instead, we're more strategically investing the money on a go-forward basis, and not as much of it's locked away in that reserve of the accommodated costs. That makes any sense. Does that make sense?
Do you have another question? Ms. Snowdoxer? Yeah, okay.
Thank you, it's me again. Thank you. I understand the reserve fund idea, and I applaud it. The piece that I wasn't understanding, still not completely clear, is when we had the accommodated funds, it was to pay for the unexpected and to, we would give back. And I think that's what you're saying. We would give back the extra money that wasn't used. But with an accommodated request, we wouldn't be asking for as much money with the reserve fund, so that money that we would be giving back, we wouldn't have in the first place. So I think that, and I will listen to more, and from my reading, I remember seeing that that reserve fund isn't necessarily just for those special ed placements. It could be for anything else, and I think that's what you were saying. So, thank you.
Mr. Weiss.
Susan could certainly add more clarity to this, but the short answer is it's not just for special education placements. It could be if we need to hire staff in district as well, right, for that particular year that was unexpected. It could be, there's few other categories that fit into what that is. But to your point, yes, this would mean that we're going to budget going forward as a whole less than the accommodated cost for special education, because we're not putting about, we're reducing it by about 250,000 or so on as an additional aside that was set aside. We're still going to have more set aside every year than what we need, so there's still a little bit of buffer, but it's not as big of a buffer. And so we're using some of that buffer more strategically while still protecting ourselves and making sure that if we need to send a kid out of district or if we need to hire additional staff, we have a way to do it without sacrificing that student's educational needs. So we're trying to find a balance between strategic use of the money and making sure we adhere to all the needs of each of the students as well.
Thank you. I saw a couple of more hands over here before. Oh, wait, yes? Yes, yep.
Nancy Doctor, Precinct 1. I had two questions. One is also about a grant. It's about the METCO grant, if that's time limited, how long does it last for? And then the second question, I really appreciated the town manager talking about getting our town salaries in line with area communities. We all know that our teachers are in line actually with Randolph, not with any of our area communities. And I know that the contract is going to be up next year. I know you can't talk about numbers, but since our teachers are grossly underpaid in Reading, I'm a little concerned about how you're going to factor that in moving forward with some of your other capital plans. I appreciate the school board reaching out to me around your budget talks in January about this, but I really do want to bring this up as a major concern that they have to be in line with our area communities in order to retain our staff. And if you could just address my METCO question, thank you.
Ms. Bott.
I'd like to answer your question first about the METCO grant. It's an $815,000 grant that renews every year, and increases are voted by the legislators. We'll see if there's an increase voted this year, but there is one budgeted, and it is a renewable annual state grant.
Dr. Malachewski.
The only thing I'll add about the contract negotiations, I for obvious reasons, can't go into a ton of detail about, as you know, we have one more year in our contract for all 5 of our bargaining units. I think in all the kind of multi-year financial models that we've built out, we put a couple of different placeholders in there for different circumstances. I think we've been monitoring sort of trends in local districts. I think that we have, so I think we are very much aware of the context that we're in. I think we are trying to prepare as much as we can, but I can't give sort of more specifics on numbers and things like targets for obvious reasons with negotiations pending.
Further discussion on the schools? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Charles Stanley Moran, Precinct 7. I think the idea of having assistant principals who have the assistant principal position as their full-time duty, conceptually it's a good idea. I do have some knowledge, however, of assistant principals in other communities. And I believe the superintendent's background is in high school education, not elementary education. So my question is, do you have an idea as to how much teaching experience in the elementary level that you're going to be looking for future assistant principals? You know, are you looking for 2 years, or are you looking for like 10 or 12 years so that the assistant principal is going to really have plenty of classroom experience?
Dr. Malachewski.
Great question. And I am a proud former elementary principal. So as a middle and high school middle and high school teacher, a proud elementary principal too. We actually hired all 5 of our elementary APs already, so I can speak a little bit about them. 2 were internal candidates, as the community may know. Jess Hester, who has been a longtime rock star 3rd grade teacher at Wood End. I believe Jess has been there over a decade, I believe, or if not, pretty close. And then Talia Hallett, who I believe is in year 12. She has been a 1st grade teacher at Birch Meadow. So I think they're both coming in with some not only extensive experience teaching, but also I think pretty great reputations for the impact they've had on students. The other candidates who we've hired are Lisa Azarito, who is the current K-4 humanities coordinator. Prior to that, she was an elementary educator. We also have hired Anne-Marie Ring, who has been a longtime assistant principal in the Winchester Public Schools and was an elementary educator prior to that. I don't have their resumes in front of me to know either Anne-Marie or Lisa's years in the classroom, but they both have extensive classroom experience. The only position we haven't hired yet for is Joshua Eaton. We went through the process, found, we think, 4 awesome candidates for the 4 schools. It didn't work out for Joshua Eaton, so they reset, posted the position, and are actually interviewing this week. But I think in all of those, I think your point is really well taken of just classroom experience really matters, especially in a time when we're having 2 new curriculum rollouts. So if we need someone who can support us with instruction, it needs to be someone who has been there and lived there. So I think that's certainly something we prioritized. I would, if I had to guess from the candidates that we looked at before, most have somewhere in the range of at least 5 to 10 years of experience in elementary.
Thank you.
Further discussion on the schools? None appearing. We will move on to the next section, which is W99, the Water Enterprise Fund. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tom Grant, Precinct 4, blue card number 95. I have a question on the Water Enterprise Fund that applies actually to the Sewer Enterprise Fund and the Stormwater as well. Just because you've put in previous year spending levels for capital, it does appear that the FY24 numbers are quite low compared to previous years in capital spend for each of these 3 funds. And I didn't know if that was related to planning, if that's just because sometimes there's some volatility, if it's because projects are completed. I just was a little more information as to why those capital numbers in each of these 3 funds seem to be a bit low in FY24.
Mr. Maltese.
Thank you very much. And yeah, really good question. So it's let me see how much detail I should go into. So the capital schedules for the enterprise fund are shown on page 305, right? And it's actually, these didn't print the long way, but essentially, it's to your point. We schedule capital essentially, right? I mean, and it just so happens that the FY25, the amount of capital that is spent inside of the budget, if you will, it's not a borrowing, is lower than previous years. It was intentional. It was planned, and. By no means is it a reduction in priority or anything like that. There's plenty of construction going on in town.
All right, thank you.
Further discussion on the Water Enterprise Fund? None appearing. Are we ready for the next section? Do we have a question? Oh, Mr. Brown, I'm sorry. Pardon me? No, I just said water enterprise. We're about to move on to sewer enterprise, which is the X99. Mr. Brown, okay.
Damn short. For you that have not been around a while in this town, the stormwater management fee was brought in a number of years ago, and technically it should be under the regular budget, because as defined by the Massachusetts Supreme Court many years ago, a fee is something that you personally use. This fee is put on everybody, and therefore it should be properly a tax. When this first came in, myself and another gentleman, we were all lined up to go to the Supreme Court, and that's based on a case back in 1984, Emerson versus the City of Boston, where the court said if it benefits everybody, then it has to be a tax. If it benefits a few people, then it can be a fee. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Arena.
Sorry, with the great speed you're making tonight, I wanted to do a quick go back on the water and sewer, if I might. If I recall from tonight's presentation, the net increase in water was up 3.5%, but sewers actually declined by 1.5%. So when it comes time for the select board to set uses of the enterprise funds, it would appear that, at least the way they're loaded here, that water and sewer rates will enjoy one of the smallest increases they have in years. Is that true? In other words, are we overusing their reserve funds? And that's a question from a history point of view as well as a decision that'll be made in the future, I understand.
Mr. Maltese?
I'm not sure that I want to speak for the select board, but certainly the increase in FY24 will not be significant.
Yeah, from my vantage point, the revolving funds, the enterprise funds, are there to really a rainy day fund of a sort. And when you get such a mild budget as we have here, my tendency would be to use less of the reserve fund. Eventually, it's really there to smooth out the wrinkles. If it's not much of a wrinkle, don't use the enterprise fund, because there will come a rainy day. Thank you.
Further discussion on the sewer enterprise fund? Yes. Ms. O'Neill?
Mary Ellen O'Neill, Precinct 6. It's not a question, it's more like a point of order, but could we remind everyone that they should be introducing themselves by name and precinct when they speak, even if they've been here for a long time? There's a lot of new members, and it's nice to know who everyone is. Thank you.
Point taken. I will repeat it. Please state your name and your precinct when speaking. Further discussion on this section? Not appearing. We'll move on to the Y99, Stormwater Enterprise. None appearing. Next up is Z99, PEG Access. Yes, Mr. Corum.
Jeffrey Corum, Precinct 7. Looking at this and thinking of seeing the instructional motion that asks for more boards and committees to be videoing their meetings, I wonder also with as more people cut the cord and switch to internet-based cable providers and things, are we seeing a decrease in this PEG access money that's coming in from Verizon and Comcast, and do we need to think about supplementing this from the general budget in order to make sure that we are still able to video and post all of these videos of the board and committee meetings? Thank you.
Mr. Maltese.
I have had a discussion with RCTV about the instructional motion. Of course, it's really hard to figure that answer out in just a couple of days since we only received it on Friday. When the instructional motion is before you, I will share that it will be a significant burden to televise all boards. It absolutely will be, and it could result in additional expenses both from technology staff and of course from RCTV staff. Of course, that is not the discussion right now. I have not received any requests from RCTV to supplement the budget prior to receiving that instructional motion.
Further discussion on this section, the PEG access? Oh, yes. Ms. Snowdoxer.
Linda Snowdoxer, Precinct 1. Just another point about RCTV and their vital role in this town. They do far more than just televise meetings. They also have courses, curriculum at the school. They also videotape programs to enable people who can't necessarily get there. And as Mr. Coram said, with fewer people using cable, they're getting less money. And so I think it is an important point for the town to be thinking about to help them with funding. And thank you for talking with Phil about that.
Further discussion on this section? None appearing. Move on to the last section, which is the Landfill Enterprise Fund. Yes, Mr. Arena.
John Arena, Precinct 1. The performance bond that was referenced that the developer must make, is that in the form of a warranty bond, or is it actually a deposit of funds, the 40K?
Mr. Maltese.
It is cash every year.
And for how long is this 40K in, 40K out arrangement? Is it forever?
It is January 2034.
And at that point, we own all the risk, is that correct?
I don't know if I could answer that question, but the agreement is to 2034.
Okay, so, and that agreement covers mere monitoring only, but any remedy, it doesn't deal with any remedy that monitoring might uncover. Is that true?
I think that's a legal question, and I'm pretty sure that it would be very complicated if something is found. You know, whose responsibility is it, and how do we deal with it? Who pays for it?
Very good, thank you.
Further discussion on this section, this last section? Yes, Ms. Snowdoxer.
Linda Snowdoxer, Precinct 1. I'm sorry for taking more time. I just realized that this might be the time to make a motion that the town consider supplementing the funds for RCTV, but to be honest, I would have no idea how much to suggest they be supplemented by. So would that take the form of an instructional motion at this point, or would that be a motion for the town to supplement RCTV in order to afford the extra demand?
I would not believe that would be within the confines of the articles. This is this is a pass-through right now. That would take a separate article at a separate meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Also, we are on the Landfill Enterprise Fund. Is there any further discussion on that? Not appearing. Then we are ready for a vote on the entire budget, which is for 135,045,333. It requires a majority vote. All those in favor, please raise your cards. And those opposed? And the motion carries. Mr. Doxer moves that we take Article 11 from the table. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, please raise your cards. Those opposed? Article 11 is taken from the table. And let's see, who will be speaking? Dr. Mills? Oh, Ms. Button. Okay.
Thank you, Jackie. This evening, we'd like to take a moment to share with you more information about our warrant Article 11, establishing a special education reserve fund. On this next slide, we have the full text of the warrant Article 11 to vote to establish a special ed reserve fund. This is in your warrant book, but I did want to put it up on screen so that you could take a moment to see it. On our next slide, we've defined what a special education reserve fund is. At first, I wanted to share with you that it was a fund created through the Municipal Modernization Act of 2016 and it allows by a majority of vote of the school committee and of the legislative body, a municipality may establish a special ed reserve fund to pay for, without further appropriation, unanticipated or unbudgeted costs of special education services. And that does include out-of-district tuition, transportation, and in-district services, such as staff, equipment, and materials. I wanted to pause for a minute to share with you that prior to 2016, when this act was established, allowing communities to establish a special ed reserve fund, there was another option for municipalities to establish a stabilization fund, which could be used for special ed out-of-district services. Once this stabilization fund was created by the town's legislative authority, it required a 2/3 vote from town meeting to release funds. The vote to release funds could only take place during town meeting. Now, within communities who do move forward and establish a special ed reserve fund, with the vote of school committee and with the vote of Board of Selectmen, funds can be released during the school year. The school department does not need to wait until annual town meeting. This is helpful because if there are unanticipated expenditures, such as a new student moves in from another community and requires out-of-district expenditures, which could be a couple $100,000, we could, through selectmen and school committee, vote on a release of funds so that other school department accounts are not frozen. This allows us much more flexibility during the school year. The Special Ed Reserve Fund is governed by Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 13E. And on the next slide, I've provided the full text of this Mass General Law. I wanted to speak further about how the Special Reserve Fund can be funded and then expended. If town meeting approves the Special Ed Reserve Fund, we will fund this account through initially through the allocation of end-year savings at an amount determined by school committee. And I wanted to pause for a moment to share with you that within our operating budget, funded through the town's accommodated cost budget, we conservatively budget special ed out-of-district tuition expenses in the following way. We calculate the cost of services for every student enrolled in an out-of-district placement. In addition to that, we calculate the cost for students who may be identified, some students who could be identified as needing additional service out of the district. We also set aside 3 unallocated tuitions in case there are students who move in or in case a student's needs suddenly and abruptly change. Those unallocated tuitions are residing in our operating budget. What we'd like to do at year end is set aside about $200,000 to $250,000 to deposit that into a special ed reserve fund, not carry it in accommodated costs, but have it in a reserve fund where it will stay, where it will generate interest for when and if we ever need it. Any interest earned becomes part of that fund. The release of funds can pay for expenses authorized by vote of the school committee and the select board. Any balance in the fund will stay in the fund and roll over year to year until it's needed and until it's expended. And then lastly, the fund balance cannot exceed 2% of Reading's annual net school spending, which is approximately $940,000. I wanted to end by sharing with you that there are many districts across the Commonwealth that have established special ed reserve funds, and this list of communities you can see varies in size and in demographics. There are urban and suburban communities, large, small, mid-sized communities all across the state. And this list is within about 40 miles of Reading. Thank you.
FinCom report, Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Ross, FinCom Chair, in Precinct 5. While it's not mandatory that FinCom provide a vote on this article, since there's really not any spend authorization in it, our Vice Chair, Jean Borowski, felt it was appropriate, and we weren't in the position to argue with her, and didn't stand in the way. So we discussed this with both school leadership and town manager, and our vote was more of an acknowledgement and a vote of confidence in this. So given that on our March 15th meeting, FinCom voted 8-0 to recommend this article to town meeting.
Thank you. Excuse me, Bylaw Committee, Ms. Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jesse Arnold, Precinct 6, Bylaws Committee Chair. On March 27th, 2023, the Bylaws Committee voted to recommend the content of this article to town meeting for its consideration by a vote of 5-0.
Further discussion? Yes, oh, okay. Ms. Nazaro.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Carla Nazaro, Precinct 1, School Committee Vice Chair. On our February 9th, 2023 school committee meeting, we had a unanimous vote of 6-0 to pass this, to approve this article.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. Sasso?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Sasso, Precinct 2. I just want to make sure I understood. So there's a line item in the accommodated shared cost, which is the SPED contingency. So is this the fund that would then eventually be removed from the line item budget as a result of this?
Ms. Button.
Thank you for that question. Could you clarify that question for me? I wasn't.
So currently, in the accommodated cost, the shared cost details, there's a line item. It's SPED transportation, SPED tuition, and then SPED contingency, and then SPED offsets, which I assume the offsets are money that we get from the state for all the
Circuit
back and
breaker.
forth.
Mhm.
But there's the SPED contingency. Is that the line item that we're
Yes.
trying to basically replace as a result of this?
Yes, within the school department's operating budget, we have a contingency of 3 unassigned school tuitions. We'd like to set aside 1 into the reserve fund, if I understand you correctly.
I'll be clear. So in the future, is this line item going to show up in the budget still? Because this is a shared cost. This is not a school budget line item. So I just want to understand where the money, or where the line item in the budget that we're trying to remove. So it's not this. This is still here. Is that
Yes, it's out of the school department budget.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Mr. Arena?
John Arena, Precinct 1. I know the town accountant at the end of the year does a reconciliation of free cash, and in that calculation are, if memory serves, a couple of other cash balances for that I guess represent cash we could put our hands on if needed. Would this account end up as part of that reconciliation?
Mr. Maltese?
Thank you. Since this is a stabilization fund, it would not form part of the free cash figure. It would not.
I know it's not free cash, but, and I'm sorry, Ms. Angstrom, I can't remember the phraseology, but at the end, when you certify free cash, there are other balances that are below the free cash line that also get certified.
Ms. Angstrom?
So special ed, if we had it coming in lower because contingency wasn't used, it would be part of our regeneration number for free cash. So this could affect a little bit of our regeneration because it would be moved into the state or the special ed reserve instead of closing out to free cash.
That's half the question, my question. The other half is if the town side needed it and the schools didn't, is there any way to tap that fund for town purposes under any extraordinary conditions? I guess the answer is no.
No.
Thank you.
Ms. Binder?
Thank you, Angela Binder, Precinct 5. I'm still a little unclear. So you put aside 3 tuitions, and if they're not used, they revert back to free cash, and you would like to use one of them to put into this fund. So if the other 2 are not used, or if they are, do I have that right?
Mr. Wise?
Tom Wise, Precinct 4, school committee member, also school committee policy chair. We'll be taking this up shortly as well. Ms. Binda and Mr. Sasso, to answer both of your questions a little bit. Essentially what we're doing is we wanted to, right now we sort of over allocate a reserve for special education in case the unforeseen happens, right? A child that comes in the district that we don't know about, a child that we have in the district all of a sudden is assessed and has to go out of district, whatever the case might be. That money, once it's part of the accommodated costs, comes into the school committee's budget afterwards, after this whole appropriation, all of it, the reserve, everything, all of it comes in. Once it's into us, we can use it however we want to. Sometimes it goes back to free cash, not all times. And other times we've had to use it to do other things. We had problems with certain staffing issues we had to fill in. We had February and April vacation camps where we had students that were really far behind, and we used it to staff up to bring those students up to speed in the February and April accommodation cases. So what we're trying to do is say, instead of have what amounts to about 400,000 in reserves, we want to bring that down and say we're only going to budget for 250,000 in reserves. And the other 150, we're going to use more strategically going forward. But when we have something left over at the end of the year, say it's 400,000, we're going to put some of that money in the Special Education Reserve Fund so we could use it in the future if we needed to, and the rest will return to free cash. So it is a little bit of a protection of ourselves in case something happens, but also it's the most important part of it is it's allowing us to strategically use the money on a go-forward basis. So we're not always just locking aside that, and we're not tactically using it every year. We're looking at it and we're saying, what are the strategic investments we need to do to make our district better? Ultimately, that's what this is really trying to do. For years and years, we've had this problem of how do we unlock problems about the district. We want to do full-day kindergarten. We want to do assistant principals. We want a new curriculum. All these things we want to do to make our district better. This is one educational and financial lever we're pulling to make that possible while still preparing ourselves and setting aside the case for the rainy day fund in case something goes wrong from a special education perspective. So it's not exactly 3-2-1 type thing, but it's more of a strategic budget forecasting process than anything else.
But, okay, so you just mentioned full-day kindergarten, but if it's a special ed fund, would it always have to be used for special ed? So even, whatever it is, if you have a camp and you need a special ed teacher to assist with that, that's still special ed. But if you're talking about full-day kindergarten, that's not necessarily special ed. So if this is a special ed fund, a special ed reserve fund, is it only being used for special ed?
So there's a couple of extra things like high school things and stuff like that that are in there, but based on reading the law, if we read through the law. But this reserve fund is only essentially for special education, whether it's out of district or in district. It's only for that. So, but what we're saying is, so this fund is not going to grow year over year. So if we think about it from a math, let's just take 5 years as a math perspective, right? 400,000, 5 years that you're setting aside as this contingency fee. I wish we had a math, a presentation that showed it this way. Instead of using 400,000, 5 years that's set aside for this contingency, we're going to say 250,000, 250,000, 250,000, 250,000, 250,000. So we're at 1.25 million instead of 2 million. So we have 750,000 that's left. Not all of that's going to go to the reserve fund. Some of that's going to be more strategically invested in other ways, whether it's full-day kindergarten, whether it's assistant principals, whether it's other things. And some of that 750,000 is going to go into the reserve fund. Does that make sense? So if you take that 2 million over the 5 years, and Sharon, jump in if I'm off base as well, please, right? We're going to still have that contingency set aside, and some of it we're going to say, let's strategically invest, and then another set of that is going to go into the reserve fund. So for example, let's say we're going to say, of that 750, we're going to put 450 over that 5-year period in the reserve fund. So that means we still have 300,000 we can use over that 5-year period for other things that we want to strategically invest in, whether it's curriculum, whether it's full-day kindergarten support, whether it's whatever the case might be. It's essentially just saying we have this thing, we want to unlock it and use it more appropriately, more strategically, rather than very tactically hitting on short-term needs. Does that make any sense if you think about it from a numbers perspective?
Well, it does, but then it's also less money going back into free cash, so.
It definitely does have a regeneration effect.
Yeah.
In terms of that perspective, absolutely, which is one of the key reasons why we want to talk about it with FinCom. And it's definitely one of the regeneration conversations we've had with Sharon at the financial forums and things along those lines as well. But the opposite side of that is we're going to use less from that perspective on a go-forward basis because we're not reserving as much anymore as well.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? None appearing? Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor, please raise your cards. And those opposed? The motion carries. Business under Article 14. Ms. Fiorenti? Oh, Mr.
Jennifer Fiorenti.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jonna Fiorenti. I'm the Community Services Director. Tonight, presenting with me, I have long-term Recreation Committee member Rich Hand. He's been a committee member for over 15 years. I also have Emily Sisson. She was the prior Recreation Committee Chair for a year and served on the Recreation Committee for also 8 years. So both very passionate members of the community, and Emily's now on FinCom. So what we're going to do is Rich is going to start us off with some history of the Birch Meadow Master Plan. I'm going to go into the key areas that the master plan is focusing on phase 1, and then Emily will just wrap it up with a quick summary of what we went over and ask you all for the funding request. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Rich.
Mr. Hand?
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you for your leadership in the Recreation Department, and thank you for being a passionate promoter for recreation in this town. So a lot to be thankful for having you as a leader in this town. As Jenna said, my name is Rich Hand, and I've been involved in the Birch Meadow Master Plan for 15 years. And I'm thrilled tonight to tell you about the update of the master plan. This journey started in 2007 when the Master Plan Subcommittee was formed to review the recreational needs of the Birch Meadow area. In 2018, the Recreation Committee formed a cross-functional working group to monitor the trends of recreation as well as the community needs. Our group included conservation, school committee, youth organizations, and in 2019, a survey was sent out to the residents of Reading. We received over 1,000 response and conducted 12 focus groups within the town. We talked to the neighbors within the Birch Meadow area. We talked to the school athletics department, youth organizations to understand their needs. And based on the feedback, here are the top recommendations. Restrooms in pavilion, passive recreation, lighting, and more parking. In 2020, we hired a consulting firm to design the master plan for us. With community input, this report is a 64-page report. Last year, the Select Board approved $1.5 million with ARPA funding for Phase 1. And I'm delighted to introduce, again, Jenna back on the podium to provide us with more details on the Phase 1 construction plan.
Ms. Fiorenti.
Thank you. So first, we're going to start with a major infrastructure project of this Phase 1, and it's the new parking area on Birch Meadow Drive, which is the lot right across from Coolidge. Right now, you can see the existing conditions of the parking lot, not ideal. This is a main part of our big school drop-off and pickup area. Parents quite frequently are going in and out of the parking lot, don't know where to go. There's not an entry and an exit. There's only one entry and exit, so it's very confusing getting in and out of there. So what we're proposing is just a safer parking area. We're asking for delineated line parking spots with the lot meeting ADA compliance. We will have designated entry and exit and entry points. As you can see now, we added an entry and exit point on both sides of the parking lot. We're going to be adding safety lighting for the evenings when we have our sports and our events going on. We're going to have several environmental improvements with drainage and stormwater management, as well as a couple electrical charging stations inside the parking lot. We're going to improve the walking area along the Aberjona, and Chuck was quite helpful in that initiative, our conservation administrator, as well as Ryan Percival, our town engineer. He's been very, very involved with this process as far as the drainage and the stormwater management of the parking lot, which is very important, and the area along the Aberjona. So the lot will also include 55 parking spaces. And again, it creates a safer drop-off and pickup area for our families at Coolidge Middle School. And the lot function and design included several town employees and school employees, including the Coolidge principal and the police. So the next thing that we're talking about is the pavilion and the central spine walkway. The overall pavilion area, it'll be 1,800 square feet. And the storage and the restrooms will be about 650 square feet. There will be mechanical room upgrade capabilities for the lights that currently exist on the Driscoll Field and the multi-purpose areas of the Birch Meadow Park. And it will help us with potential future lighting projects throughout the park. So right now, if no one knows about this, we have a green shed that's right next to Driscoll Field, our softball field. And right now we have to manually go in and turn off and on the lights. So oftentimes people are forgetting to turn off the lights, and it's quite disturbing. So we don't want the lights to be on left on all night and wasting town dollars, certainly. I get those calls quite frequently. And it'll just provide a centralized space for the lights to be for the future, and I will be able to just control them from my phone. So the outside picnic and gathering space of the pavilion will be awesome. It's going to be a central gathering space for several events that go down there. Reading Softball Little League has their championship day. We have Town Day. We have the fireworks that are hosted by the Friends of Reading Recreation down there. In addition, it's another space for high school students to go out and eat their lunches and things like that. The Central Spine Walkway will be ADA compliant in about a quarter of a mile with low-level pedestrian lighting. Again, just enhancing the safety of our parks is really important to us. Many walk and bike also from this area. Quite frequently, people who live over in the Bancroft Ave area, their kids will walk or bike from that area all the way over to Birch Meadow or to Coolidge, and obviously the high school. So it's important to create a safer way for them to get to and from school. And the most current recreation and open space plan does show the same feedback for community for more areas for passive recreation for walking and biking. The other item is our lacrosse hit wall. I think Chuck Weberly might still be here. Chuck, are you still here? Hi. So Chuck Weberly is the president of Reading Youth Lacrosse. And Reading Youth Lacrosse has been a great organization to work with, as well as all of our other organizations, obviously. They've tried to donate a hit wall several times in the past, and it's always been put on hold due to the uncertainty of the master plan. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to update our plan, because there are several organizations that want to donate in the future and be a part of the Birch Meadow Master Planning overall projects. So it enhances the practice capabilities for both our high school and youth organizations astronomically. Baseball and softball already have batting cages out there that they can use for their practices, and we want to be able to offer that to our lacrosse players. For beginners and youth players, this is the most fundamental and important skill to practice every day. There's advanced and elite players that dedicate time to hitting the wall every day to maintain their stick skills. I think Joe Huggins can probably attest to that. Some of the lacrosse players will be hitting the ball against the press box and against the side of the school building sometimes. So it'll be a great place for them to just really practice their skills. And this can be used recreationally. So when the lacrosse players aren't using it, and for high school or youth athletics, they could be used for just a game of wall ball with your friends or your family. And finally, there are some other towns that are implementing hit walls all across the state, and a few of those are listed right here. And then I also found out today that Westwood also has a hit wall. So also I just wanted to add really quick that Reading Youth Lacrosse will be donating $10,000 to the Birch Meadow Phase 1 project. And I'm going to turn it over to Emily.
Ms. Sisson?
Hi, everybody. Emily Sisson, FinCom member of Precinct 2, and as Jenna mentioned, former chair of the Rec Committee. When I was chair was when this was adopted by the Select Board as the official Birch Meadow Master Plan, so I feel like I gave birth to this thing. So I'm very excited that Jenna invited me to help kind of bring this presentation home. Just kind of summarizing the big picture of the Birch Meadow Master Plan. When we engaged Activitas, which was our consulting firm that helped us to design this plan, it had a three-phased approach, and the first was critical need, and that is what we keep referring to as Phase 1, the critical needs of the Birch Meadow area. Effectively, it's infrastructure. Also, lacrosse has become such a big sport, and the hit wall is such a small individual project. It was kind of that low-hanging fruit we could tack on to the infrastructure items that come with the spine and the walkway. So if you can see the upper map there, the red line represents where this walkway will be. I actually got here early tonight and did a loop around the area just to kind of see what we were working with. And it will really enhance the walkability from the middle and the elementary school down toward the Bancroft Ave area. The pavilion will be a wonderful gathering spot, and I know if you have kids in youth sports and you spend a lot of time there, you know there is nowhere to go to the bathroom except the one porta potty. So I think that the community input has consistently been, since I was on the Birch Meadow Master Plan starting in 2015, for restrooms and this passive recreation. As Jenna mentioned, this will be setting us up for improved lighting across the fields in subsequent phases of this master plan, giving us infrastructure for plumbing, electricity, storage, picnic areas, and then lighting on those walkways. So the big goal of Phase 1 is to create safe and accessible areas for our community, especially the parking. I know that picture didn't do it justice, but that parking lot is not a parking lot. It's a dirt word I shouldn't say on TV, so I won't. And this will really give us a chance to concentrate on our open space. As a lot of people know from the pandemic, having outdoor accessible space to be and live and walk and engage with your community was so important. So we're really excited about the plan as it stands. And so the ask here is money, of course. That's why we come to town meeting. So when we engaged Activitas, their estimate of what this would cost in 2020 was about $1.5 million to do the spine, the lacrosse wall, and the pavilions and restroom. If anyone has done work on their house in the last 2 years, you know that the costs of construction have gone up astronomically. When this went out to bid in February of this year, it came back just over 2.7, well, 2.1 plus contingency. So we're looking at 2.7 projected project costs. So we have been allocated from the select board through the ARPA funds, $1.5 million. So we're here tonight to kind of bridge that gap. Bringing this conversation to FinCom, we discussed it at length, and FinCom wasn't really interested in using more free cash or kind of going in that route. But Sharon and Fidel did a wonderful job identifying additional sources where we had some money. So what we're asking from Town Night today is to reallocate existing funding sources that already are have enough money to cover the difference in the projected costs. So $600,000 would be coming from the Parker Middle School roof project. That has $600,000. It came in under $600,000, and that's bonded at 0.87, which is a much lower rate than is currently available. There was $180,000 coming from the police station renovation roof project, also bonded at 0.87%. And then there's a 40R district incentive stabilization fund that has $917,000 in it. We'd be asking for town meeting to approve 440 of that to come to move over toward this project. The stipulation with the 40R stabilization fund is that it can only be used for capital projects, which would be here. So I feel like I forgot something, but I'm sure people have lots of questions about it, so I'm going to back up and let Alan do his thing. Thank you very much.
FinCom report, Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Ross, FinCom Chair. I stole this one from Emily just because we figured she'd be talking too much anyways. So in our March 15th meeting, we actually took 2 votes. The first of which was an 8-0 vote to recommend the substance of this article to the town meeting. The reasoning behind this is well documented, either though it's in the warrant book and it's been reiterated in the presentations this evening. This is a kind of a community priority that's been well talked about. Our second vote was on the supplemental funding. We discussed the disparity in the costs versus what was allocated by the Reading ARPA Advisory Committee. Again, given the community priority, we looked at all of the funding sources, and while we appreciate the free cash balance, and as Emily mentioned, it was important for us to look at all options. And we were impressed from specifically from Sharon and Fidel, the other funding sources that were available. So we had a lot of discussion on this, and really the looking at the Parker Middle Roof project and the 40R district incentive payments, really were the most appealing. And we voted at our March 15th meeting 8-0 to recommend those funding sources to town meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Herrick.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Karen Herrick, Precinct 8, Select Board Vice Chair.
I just want to say how happy I am that we're here. I fully support this, and I just wanted to take a moment to celebrate small wins like the fact that we didn't have to spend all that money on the Parker roof, and we're probably actually going to get it done. And I wanted to say kudos to facilities and the RPD for getting their renovation done and having funds to spare so that we could reallocate them to this project. So thank you. This presentation is wonderful, and I am so excited. Please, all of you vote for this as well.
Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Brown.
Excuse me. Bill Brown, Precinct 8. Just for information, the first master plan on Birch Meadow came out in 1930. And if you want to see it go down to engineering, I don't think there's very much has changed. One of the problems I see with this whole situation, or several, I think you're increasing the amount of impervious surface in this area. When we got the funding for this building that we sit in tonight, it was made very clear by the state that we cannot increase any more impervious surface in this area because the school committee, good, bad, or indifferent, owns all the way out to Birch Meadow Drive. And that was one of the conditions when we built this building. Number two, you're talking about picnic tables. I will guarantee you, within 2 or 3 months, you're going to have a rat situation. That's what shut down Imagination Station, among others. People left their stuff there. The rats came up and had a hell of a good time. I know perfectly well from experience. I used to walk that when it was a meadow. There were rats in there then. They don't go away. They just keep multiplying. As far as that picture you showed on the parking lot, that is false information. If you walk that parking lot today, it is not that bad. And I can't see roads in this town are worse condition than that parking lot will ever be, and yet you want to spend $97,000 to park a lot? You're out of your mind.
Further discussion? Mr. Marina.
John Arena, Precinct 1. Reusing funds that are set up as debt service for another project, does that require a separate authorization? So you mentioned there were funds set up for the Parker roof, and those are authorized for a specific purpose. Is there a special motion needed to repurpose them at this point? Or is that, in fact, what tonight's vote is?
Ms. Freed.
Thank you. So under the borrowing authorization statute, we are permitted to use unused proceeds from bonds. And if you look at the motion as revised, which may differ from what was circulated in the packet, you can, sorry, can you put the motion up? Sorry, thanks. You can see that we're identifying that it's $600,000 from the unspent proceeds of the borrowing related to the Parker Middle School roof account, $180 from the unspent proceeds from the borrowing related to the police department renovation account. So when you vote tonight, you will be voting to specifically allow use of those unused borrowing funds.
Thank you, Ms. Freed. Question on center field. Looks like we're going to have a short porch out there now. How much does center field get pulled in under this plan? If you bring up the, I think the second to the last slide that was up there earlier, one of the color images. Not that one. Does anybody zoom in a little bit? I think yeah, why don't you back up one? That's kind of it. You can see in the upper right image that that red stripe actually intrudes some degree in center field. I don't recall how far center field and the high school field is, but do you happen to know how much that gets pulled in with this plan?
Yes, so sorry. I actually added in that highlighted area, and it's not showing up so perfectly right now, but it will not affect the high school playing field at all.
So the current outlines of the field, which includes a circular home run fence with a yellow marker on top, that's going to stay as is, true?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, right in the edge here. Yes.
Kenna Pilavsky, Precinct 7. I wanted to follow up on something that I think we started discussing about half a year ago or so with regards to the Birch Meadow Drive and then where it turns into John Carver Road. It's been brought up that that curve, it's potentially a hazard to individuals that are walking. And you've mentioned that there's an improvement to walkability within this particular plan. So I'm wondering, are you looking to address that specific curve in this plan, or is this something you can add on to or explore further? Thank you.
Yes, we are, and we actually took out the parking lot that was slated to be over there because we heard the neighborhood feedback in the community forum. So certainly we know that people go around that area fast, and that was the main concern of the neighborhood. So the parking lot will be gone, but we do plan to again increase the walkability in that area with trails and walkways.
Okay, thank you. And that was a wonderful
You're welcome.
presentation.
Another question
Thanks.
up the back there, so, no? Yes, right over there.
Hello, Martha Moore, Precinct 8 and Chair of the Conservation Commission. And I have 3 comments. The first one in response to Mr. Brown's concern about the impervious surface. This has passed through conservation approval, and the project plan has stormwater management included in it. So it should not cause problems due to the impervious surface in the parking lot. My second question is, has the pavilion plan been finalized architecturally, or is that still a conceptual drawing?
Yes, it is finalized.
Okay. I'm sorry I missed the chance to put in input. I was thinking as I looked at your diagram today, it would be a great place for solar panels. So, you know, as we're moving on to phase 2 or 3, it would be good to consider solar panels in any of these projects.
Yeah, and can I respond to you really quick? We did actually ask Activitas that exact question. We wanted to put solar panels on there. They didn't think that they would be as effective in that area because of all the shade in the bay of trees that's over there.
Great.
So we did explore that.
Okay, and then I just had one question beyond that. In Article 18, we're talking about money left over from building Turf 2. Would that be an appropriate source for funding for this phase 1 of the Birch Meadow plan? It's all part of Birch Meadow.
Mr. Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. In Article 18, it's actually funds that were never borrowed. So those funds are not available to us. So we're cleaning up a past account.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, Ms. Snowdoxer.
Linda Snowdoxer, Precinct 1. I just wanted to emphatically express my support for this article, and I also wanted to emphatically say that the parking lot is a hazard. If our goal is to make Reading walkable and to enable people with mobility challenges and to keep our school children and families safe, that parking lot needs to be fixed. And so I don't know how the perception could be that it is safe the way it is. So I just wanted to enforce that it does need this work. Thank you. And thanks for all the work you put into this program.
Right up in the back? Yes.
Phil Dardino, Precinct 3. Move the question.
That requires a second. Is there a second? Second. Okay, this requires a 2/3 vote. Do I have my counters from the other night? Mr. Sasso, could you take your section plus the Finance Committee? Mr. O'Neill, could you take your side of the middle? Let's see, Ms. Binder, could you take, yes, could you take the middle, your side of this, the middle section? And Mr. Barnes, could you take the select board plus your side? Okay, this is a motion to end debate. It's non-debatable. All those in favor of ending debate, please rise. Show your blue card to be easier for the counters.
This is the end of it.
2.
2.
18.
18.
18.
22.
22. And those opposed, ending debate.
Seven.
7.
11.
11.
20.
20.
36.
36. The vote being 60 in the affirmative, 74 in the negative, the motion, the question is not moved. We will continue debate, and I did see a card right over here. Yes, you're right there. We have, before you speak, we have a motion to adjourn. I assume you meet until Monday.
Can I ask one?
This is a majority vote. All those in favor of adjourning, please raise your cards. And those opposed, motion does not carry. You have the floor.
Alicia Williams, Precinct 8. I had a question about the drawing. Can you put it back up? So is this drawing like what it's going to be?
Yes.
Okay, so is
Except
it,
for the pavilion and the top one, it's actually just repositioned ever so slightly. In the second diagram, you can see we just repositioned it for a couple of different reasons, but.
does anyone realize that they took a field out? I pulled up Google Maps. There's a field missing now. We're down to 3 fields. There used to be 4. That's a big problem in a town that needs field space.
No, actually, there's 3 fields that are currently there, not 4. And we're moving a softball field / baseball field to Coolidge Middle School in the master plan. And this was discussed heavily in the community forum process. So you're losing a field here, but it's getting put over at Coolidge. There's only 3 softball fields at that field. Oh, and Emily wants to add.
Ms. Sisson?
Emily Sisson, Precinct 2. Just want to add, there's no fields changing at all in this ask. In this ask, we're only talking about the red highlight. So the long-term conceptual plan includes, I actually think it's 4 softball fields. I think 2 in Coolidge and 2 here. But the softball fields are visionary and like 10 to 15 plus years away. So right now, we're going to maintain the fields that exist. The only changes that will be happening are adding walkways, adding lights, plumbing, electricity, pavilion, lacrosse. Everything else stays as it was.
And you're moving a field to Coolidge. That's, am I not in this phase, but eventually?
In the visionary plan is such that that's what we want. That's so far down the road, like that could change. So
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
One on the very back, yes.
Thank you, Maureen Hurley, Precinct 3. I know you're saying that once this is done, Phase 1 is shovel-ready. Has that been communicated to the administration at the high school? And what effect will it have on the current high school season for the teams that use those fields? I know demolition of the green bunker was an immediate step from what I understand. So how does that affect the kids that are playing on those fields now?
Sure. So the only thing that it may affect, and we did speak with the athletic director in a meeting about this, the thing that it may affect is the visiting area, the visiting bench of the high school softball field. But we don't know that for sure until the project starts and the area is isolated. It may not affect that area. Also, I know that the youth organizations and Reading men's softball use the lights at those fields, and we were told that if this passes this evening, that one of their first priorities will be to set up a temporary electrical panel so people won't lose access to the lights at night. So as far as the impact on the playing fields down there, there should be very little that we know about right now. And the only thing that we were told would be the impact possibly on the visitors bench.
So if this is shovel-ready and we are halfway through the high school season, should this be delayed? What happens? We don't expect something. What happens is it going to be safe for those girls? The balls get hit and they have to go retrieve balls over by that area by the bunker. What happens? Do they become homeless for the second half of their season? Suddenly the fields aren't usable? What's the plan?
Mr. Maltese?
So I think what construction won't start until the summer. I'll say that, right? So it's not going to happen until school lets out, and we are coordinating heavily with our director of facilities and director of athletics to be mindful of those impacts. It is construction, but we are going to coordinate all the efforts well.
Okay, so my takeaway, is that it doesn't affect the athletes playing at the lighted field primarily. That's not going to affect their spring season.
Primarily.
Okay, and I know the bunker, though, has been said to be emptied out. Is there temporary housing for the equipment that is in that bunker?
Ms. Fiorenti?
Yes, so I actually have been talking with Dominic Savino, the head of Reading Softball Little League, as well as Neil McKinney from Reading Men's Softball. I have indicated that I would be willing to put a temporary shed on the field. Joe Huggins has also weighed in on that from facilities and said he did not have an issue. So my next step was going to be to contact Mike Hannaford, pending obviously this discussion, and find a place to have that temporary shed placed so it won't displace the high school athletics or the youth athletics or men's softball.
Thank you. Just one last comment in regards to the down the road softball fields, because I know you said behind Coolidge they're talking about take away one, adding two behind Coolidge baseball/softball fields. I just want to point out that we're on the cusp of, I think, 9 baseball fields in town. We have 4.5. So I would hope that down the road they're keeping in mind that there's really, what I don't see is fighting space for baseball fields, and yet everyone's clamoring to use softball fields. So I hope that's kept in mind as the rec committee and those powers involved pursue this down the road. Thank you. Thanks for the
Further discussion? In the middle here? Yes. In the middle? Yes. No, behind you. Ms. Childress?
Ellen Childress, quick comment, Precinct 3. On the pavilion, I noticed the roof sort of goes in a V to the center, and I see problems with snow removal and ice forming there. Okay? And you may have a plan for that, or I don't know.
I know that was a question that was asked to the architect, and they assured us that it would not be an issue. They talked about the drainage pipes over there. Ryan might know a little bit more on that. Sorry to call you out, Ryan, but he knows all of these intricacies better than me.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Excuse me. Ryan Percival, town engineer. We've been assured that the design, because we had the same question as well, along with Joe Huggins from facilities, whether or not that was going to collect snow and or be a problem with runoff. Because we're putting in, I believe, a metal style roof, is that correct? We're going to see a lot of that just sloughing off in the heating of the direct sun. So it'll collect in that center area and then drain down in and out.
Let me
So-
say right
so-
now, I've got my doubts.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Further discussion? Yes, right here.
Hi, Lisa Bebo, Precinct 7. I wanted to ask a question about the lights, if I could. They looked a bit taller than what I think I understood them to be, so I just want to be sure that they are still downcast lighting and they are night sky compliant.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so I just took that picture just as a high-level view of what it would be, but they are downcast.
They are downcast. Thank you very much.
Further discussion, right on the edge in the back there, Mr. Talbot, I believe? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dave Talbot, Precinct 5. Thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of questions. I have not been involved in the meetings that have led up to this. I know it's been years and years, so forgive me. The open area that's now the dirt potholed lot that you've referenced obviously needs to be fixed up. That used to be Imagination Station, right? That was the playground area. Now it's just open. That was demolished because it was unsafe. It wasn't a parking lot before, right? It was the Imagination Station, correct? And there's a lot of open asphalt parking lots all over the Birch Meadow campus right now. The high school has huge asphalt parking lots. There's the middle school and Birch Meadow, both, they all have large parking lots. So what is the overall count or rationale for more parking down there as opposed to, I know you want to clean up and make it better than what it is, but the need for more parking spaces in that area versus what's there from the schools now?
Sure. I think since it's been Imagination Station parking, our youth organizations have expanded astronomically, and the activity down there is very, very active. I know also that lot, if that was to be something other than a parking lot, that would impact drop-off and pick-up at Coolidge quite a bit. And I don't think that the school would ever agree that that would be anything other than a parking lot, because that is the place where parents drop off and pick up every single day.
The dirt area?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's not enough asphalt parking at the high school to accommodate the youth activities you've been mentioning, that was calculated?
Yeah, I would say no. I've also been to the high school. I was just there last Thursday, and I barely could find a parking spot, and the seniors aren't even in school anymore. So even if you're talking about the teachers who park at Coolidge, who might actually have to park across the street in the lot, there wouldn't even be a spot for them, I would say, in the high school parking lot or right
But
above
there's,
the...
okay, and there's data in all these studies talking about all that, I assume?
Yep, Activitas did do a parking study, and it's outlined in their 64-page report, the parking.
Second question is the woods along Oakland Road still being contemplated to be used for development of some kind, senior housing or senior center? Is that part of the master planning process? Because it is part of the Birch Meadow area.
That is not part of this article, sorry.
I know it isn't, but it's related to master planning for the Birch Meadow area, for sure, no?
No.
It's not part of the area?
No. This master plan is essentially the area inside of the complex.
The reason I'm asking is that we have an open, undeveloped, unsightly site along Birch Meadow Drive now that if one is considering building things flanking the schools where you have an open, unused area now would seem to be a site you would consider as one site in addition to the woods, which would need to be cut down. So I just wondered how that figured in. It sounds like it didn't figure in, that thought of the two sites and what we're doing with the larger totality of the area, including the woods that are, I guess, slated to be cut down. Maybe. Okay,
Yeah.
we don't know.
No.
Okay. Third question, 40R stabilization fund. This is monies that the state gave to the town based on the very large 40R developments downtown, correct?
I would say that the state has an incentive program that pays a certain dollar amount per unit built within the 40R district.
Right, and as I understand it, the theory of that is it's a way for the state to compensate towns for the impacts created by the significant large developments that the 40R creates.
I would say that it's an incentive program to encourage 40R development.
Because we read the website and it's for infrastructure improvements. And I mean, I come at this and a lot of us with sidewalks in horrific condition surrounding not just directly in, but in the neighborhoods. They've been decades and decades of.
Is this tied in with the question before us?
Yeah, it's a question about the use of 40R incentive funds for this article, when my understanding is those are really for impacts related to the 40R developments that created the incentive payments, and for infrastructure such as parking downtown or sidewalks in downtown or the neighborhoods around the downtown.
The only legal restriction that we have on using the 40R incentive program is it must be used for capital projects. We verified that this is in fact the capital project.
Sure.
And this is a legal and appropriate use of the incentive program.
Not doubting that at all.
And in our discussion with FinCom, we presented various various funding sources, and I don't want to speak for FinCom, but this seemed like an appropriate use of that fund because it is going to be a community-wide benefit.
Understood. Just wanted to get it out there that there was a purpose behind the 40R funds back to the town. There's significant infrastructure needs in and around the downtown, and just wanted to get that into town meetings radar for later capital expenditures, because there are significant parking and sidewalk needs in the vicinity of those projects.
And I'll say that there are $917,000 in this fund today. Should town meeting choose to approve this article, we will still have $500 and some thousand left in the fund.
Good to know. Those were my questions. Thank you all very much.
Other questions? Mr. Arena?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Arena, Precinct 1. The question on the roof had me thinking. The engineering of the pavilion, what's the concept around, it's an open building, it'll be open to the public. As you think about vandalism or misuse of that space, what are the aspects of the design that either address vandalism or attempt to counter it?
Yes, we did. There's going to be paneling on there that is actually vandal resistant. So if anyone was to spray paint it, and I'm looking at Ryan, that it could easily be power washed off. And then the metal roof is also a big thing that we considered as far as drainage, and we've had in the past kids climbing on roofs and damaging the roofs, which would be very difficult to do with a metal roof as opposed to just a rubber roof or another type of shingled roof.
And as you think about the design of the building, what capacity is it sized for at the moment? The restroom, is it a single stall on each side?
Yep, there's single stalls on each side. We also do have security we would have security on those doors as well, so they would lock at a certain time of night, so you can't access them after 10 p.m.
And they can't be locked by, the nightmare scenario for me would be somebody in there with a young child, kind of. Can those doors be locked by the occupant? I suppose they would have to be, yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The nightmare scenario to me is having somebody grab a young child and disappear in one of the rooms. And nothing's impossible in this world. So the question is, those rooms actually can be locked for the intended purpose. And that's the intention, is that when they're being used, those spaces can be locked. They're not open to the public, like a...
Yeah, there is a lock on the door.
Okay. So the security question is relevant in that sense, too. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, on the edge here.
Hi, Harrison Engels, Precinct 7. I know this is likely not going to happen here. I just was hoping to keep it in the visionary world of a dog park. I know that we're all tired of talking about dogs, but I noticed that the survey was done in 2019, and I was surprised by the 27% interest in a dog park. But 2020 happened, and I know I bought a dog, and maybe some other people did extra too. And I also, while I try to stay off of it, I noticed that on Parents Network Facebook page, it often comes up about dogs and off leash, etc. And I was just wondering if there's a way we could sneak in a little closed, fenced-in space. And I live right there, and I'm happy to help maintain it. But if we could put in a dog park, that's what I would like to say. That's all. And also, maybe we could put a security camera on the pavilion. I'm sure you guys thought of that.
Further discussion? In the, Mr. Sasso?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Sasso, Precinct 2. So I want to ask a couple of financial-related questions. First of all, when the project was initially presented to the RAC committee, did that 1.5 include contingency? I was just curious on that.
I believe it was just construction at that point. 1.5 was the estimate for construction.
Okay. Has there been any look back at the RAC money that's been spent? Is there any clawback or any issues that, I mean, that money's going to expire in like the end of 2024, if I remember correctly. And I know it's been allocated out to a number of different organizations, and some of it has been spent and some of it hasn't been spent. I'm just curious if that was one of the ideas that the committee looked at for funding support.
We have fully allocated every dollar in ARPA. We are tracking quite consistently the usage, and you know it's really up to the select board, obviously, to allocate. But we at this point, I'm not very confident that enough would be freed up to fund this project.
And if so, if money isn't spent from ARPA, what happens to it?
So the rule is that the money has to be allocated. So essentially, it has to be assigned to a project by December 31st, 2024, and it can be spent fully until December 31st, 2026. So we do have some runway left.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Further discussion? There was a hand. No? Okay. Over here. Right there. Yes. Oh. Mr. Sullivan. Oh, Mr. Sullivan, actually.
I looked twice.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Sullivan, Precinct 7. Just wondering, there's the existing walkway that kind of goes from the tennis courts over to Turf 2, where the new walkway will be tying in there by the batting cages. That walkway sits very low, and during wet weather, there's significant standing water on there. Are we going to be addressing that at all through this project?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Thank you.
Ms. Binder?
Thank you. Angela Binder, Precinct 5, and a member of the Recreation Committee. As we can tell by the answers that Jenna has been giving, it has just been vetted. This project has just been vetted with all of the surveys and responses. And what I thought was amazing too, after so much work had been done, the project went to the select board and it went back to the neighbors and everywhere, and the architect just kept tweaking everything and responding to everyone. And it has been such a long time, and something that so many people in the community have been waiting for. So I want to thank the town staff who worked on this, and all the volunteers for the hours and hours and hours. And I really do hope that we can push it over the edge and make it, you know, a reality. And all of those other things that people ask for, is there room for a dog park, or could you adjust this? you know, there's conceptual drawings for the next few phases, but nothing is set in stone yet. And I'm sure that, you know, when the next phases come up, there will be more discussion. And the other thing that was so impressive about what the architect did was the way it was broken down into easy to accomplish, quick money, long-range plans. There are lots of opportunities if other sports organizations want to see something done to raise funds, put it forth. So this, I think, will just be wonderful to see this happening and to get the infrastructure done and then to really push it over. So I do hope everyone supports it. Thank you.
Right here.
Heather Klisch, Precinct 7. I'd like to move the question.
Okay, I will let you know there was at least one non-member who had asked to speak when all town meeting members had had the chance. You still have the right to end debate, but I just wanted to let you know. So this is a 2/3 vote to end debate. All those in favor of ending debate, please rise.
Do you have to count? Am I counting again? Yeah, count.
Eighteen.
18.
Thirty-two.
32.
45.
25.
40.
45.
And 40?
40, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, 40, and what was Ms. Bender's?
Angela.
Oh, it's 45?
45.
45, I'm sorry, okay. Okay, and those opposed to ending debate?
Oh, I get to count again.
Eight.
Sorry, Mr.
Eight.
8.
4.
4.
2.
2.
3.
3. The vote being 135 in the affirmative and 17 in the negative, the question has been moved. We will now go to the a vote on the main motion, which also requires a 2/3 vote. So all those in favor of the main motion, please rise.
Twenty-four.
24.
Yes.
29.
29.
43.
43.
38.
38. Okay, and those opposed?
Zero.
0.
2.
2.
0.
0.
0.
0. The vote being 134 in the affirmative and 2 in the negative, the motion carries.
Thank you.
We have a motion to adjourn until Monday evening. Before I take that, I would like to remind you to leave your cards at the back table. All those in favor of adjournment, please raise your cards. Those opposed, this town meeting stands adjourned until Monday evening.
Yeah, just get up.